My drama springs from the fact that, while we students had no money, we still hungered for movies, music, and plays. So we would arrive at the theater 10 minutes early and approach the gentleman, what was he called? The leader of the claque, shaking his hand and slipping 100 lire into his palm. Then he would admit us. We were a paying claque. It also happened that the doors of the college were locked inexorably at midnight. After that hour, those who were outside remained out, because there were no residential obligations, and if a student wished, he could be absent even for a month. Practically speaking, this meant that at 10 minutes to midnight we had to leave the theater and scurry to our destination. But at 10 minutes to midnight the play had not yet ended. And so it was that, over a 4-year period, I saw the theatrical masterpieces of every time and place, except for their last 10 minutes. Thus I have lived a lifetime without knowing if Oedipus faced up to the horrible revelation, or what became of the 6 characters in search of an author, whether Oswald Alving was cured thanks to penicillin, if Hamlet finally discovered that to be was better than not to be. I still don't know who the real Signora Ponzo was, if Ruggiero Ruggeri, Socrates drank the hemlock, if Othello punched up Iago before setting off on a second honeymoon, if the imaginary invalid's health improved, if everyone threw rice after Romeo and Juliet, and who was Bunbury. I thought I was the only human being afflicted by this ignorance until, casually reliving old memories with my friend Paolo Fabri, I discovered that for years he has suffered from the same anguish in reverse. During his student years he worked in a theater, organized and run by students. His job was to stand at the door and take tickets. As many ticket holders arrived late, he was never able to slip into a seat before the beginning of the second act. He saw Lear, blind and raving, wandering around with the corpse of Cordelia in his arms, but he had no idea what had brought the two of them to that ghastly pass. He heard Blanche Dubois profess her faith in strangers, but he racked his brain trying to figure out why such a sweet lady was being carted off to the bin. He never understood why Hamlet was so down on his uncle, who seemed a perfectly nice man. He saw Othello perform his dread act, but had no notion why such a docile little wife was being placed beneath a pillow and not on top of one. Well, to make a long story short, Paolo and I exchanged confidences. And we discovered that a splendid old age lies before us. Seated on the front steps of a country house or on a bench in the park, for years we will tell each other stories. He, endings. I, beginnings, amid cries of amazement at every discovery of prelude or catharsis. You don't mean it. What did he say? He said, "Mother, I want the son." Ah, then he was done for. Yes, but what was wrong with him? I whisper the answer in his ear. My God, what a family. Now I understand. But tell me about Oedipus. There isn't a lot to tell. His mom commits suicide and he blinds himself. The poor kid. All the same. They tried to tell him in every possible way. True, I just can't figure it. Why didn't he understand? Put yourself in his place. The plague begins. He's a king, happily married. So when he married his mom, he didn't. Of course not. That's the whole point. It's like a Freud case history. If they told you, you wouldn't believe it. Will we be happier afterwards? Or will we have lost the freshness of those who are privileged to experience art as real life, where we enter after the trumps have been played, and we leave without knowing who's going to win or lose the game? 1988. How to justify a private library. Generally speaking, from my childhood on, I have been always subjected to two, and only two, kinds of joke. You're the one who always answers, and you resound in valleys. All through my early years I believed that, by some strange chance, all the people I met were stupid. Then, having reached maturity, I was forced to conclude that there are two laws no human being can escape. The first idea that comes into a person's mind will be the most obvious one, and, having had an obvious idea, nobody ever thinks that others may have had the same idea before. I possess a collection of review headlines, in all the languages of the Indo-European family, going all the way from, the echo of eco, to, a book with echoes. In the latter case I suspect the printed headline wasn't the first idea that came into the subeditor's mind. What probably happened was this. The editorial staff met, they debated some 20 possible titles, and finally the managing editor's face lighted up and he said, "Hey, guys, I've had a fantastic idea." And the others responded, "Boss, you're a devil. Where do you get them?" "It's a gift," he must have replied. I'm not saying people are banal. Taking as divine inspiration, as a flash of originality, something that is obvious reveals a certain freshness of spirit, an enthusiasm for life and its unpredictability, a love of ideas, small as they may be. I will always remember my first meeting with that great man Irving Goffman, whom I admired and loved for the genius and penetration with which he could identify infinitesimal aspects of behavior that had previously eluded everyone else. We were sitting at an outdoor cafe when, looking at the street after a while, he said, "You know something? I believe there are too many automobiles in circulation in our cities." Maybe he had never thought this before because he had had far more important things to think about. He had just had a sudden epiphany and still had the mental freshness to express it. I, a little snob infected by the unzeitgemäß Betrachtungen of Nietzsche, would have hesitated to say it, even if I thought it. A second shock of banality occurs to many people in my condition. That is, people who possess a fairly sizable library, large enough in my case that someone entering our house can't help but notice it. Actually, it takes up the whole place. The visitor enters and says, "What a lot of books. Have you read them all?" At first I thought that the question characterized only people who had scant familiarity with books, people accustomed to seeing a couple of shelves with 5 paperback mysteries and a children's encyclopedia, bought in installments. But experience has taught me that the same words can be uttered also by people above suspicion. It could be said that they are still people who consider a bookshelf as a mere storage place for already read books and do not think of the library as a working tool. But there is more to it than that. I believe that, confronted by a vast array of books, anyone will be seized by the anguish of learning, and will inevitably lapse into asking the question that expresses his torment and his remorse. The problem is that when someone says, "Eco, you're the one who always answers," you can reply with a little laugh and, at most, if you want to be polite, with, "That's a good one." But the question about your books has to be answered, while your jaw stiffens and rivulets of cold sweat trickle down your spine. In the past I adopted a tone of contemptuous sarcasm. "I haven't read any of them. Otherwise, why would I keep them here?" But this is a dangerous answer because it invites the obvious follow-up, "And where do you put them after you've read them?" The best answer is the one always used by Roberto Lady, and more, dear sir, many more, which freezes the adversary and plunges him into a state of awed admiration. But I find it merciless and angst-generating. Now I have fallen back on the riposte. "No, these are the ones I have to read by the end of the month. I keep the others in my office," a reply that on the one hand suggests a sublime ergonomic strategy, and on the other leads the visitor to hasten the moment of his departure. 1990. How to compile an inventory. The Italian government has given assurances that something will be done to guarantee the autonomy of our country's universities. Italian universities were autonomous in the Middle Ages, and they functioned better than they do today. American universities, whose perfection has become legendary for Europeans, are autonomous. German universities are under the jurisdiction of the regional authorities, but local governments are more alert than a centralized administration, and in many cases, like the appointment of professors, the regional parliament merely ratifies formally what the university itself has already decided. In Italy, if a scientist discovers that phlogiston doesn't exist, he will most likely be able to announce his finding only if he happens to teach a course on the axiomatics of phlogiston, because a course title, once it is on the ministry's lists, can be changed only after protracted negotiations among all the institutions of higher learning in the country, along with the Superior Council of Education, the minister, and some other organizations whose names escape me. Research goes forward because someone glimpses a path that no one has seen before, and a few other people, with exceptional decisional flexibility, decide to believe in him or her. But if someone wants to move a desk in Vitupano, a decision must come from Rome, after consultations with Chivasso, Tarantola, Offergola, Montelepri, and Decimomanu, so obviously the desk will be moved only when the move is no longer necessary. Teachers engaged on temporary contracts ought to be outside scholars of great reputation and irreplaceable expertise. But between the submission of the university's request and notification of the ministry's approval, we usually reach the end of the academic year, with only a few weeks of instruction remaining, unless the ministry simply says no. Clearly, in such an aleatory situation, it is hard to attract a Nobel laureate, and we end up with the dean's unemployed sister-in-law. Research bogs down also because the bureaucratic routine makes us waste time in solving ridiculous problems. I am the head of a university department. Some years ago we were told to make an inventory of the department's physical possessions, a scrupulous list. Our only available employee was supposed to deal with 1,000 other questions. But it was possible to farm out the task to a private organization that asked for 300,000 lire. We had the money, but in funds meant for inventoriable materials. How could we declare that an inventory was inventoriable? I had to set up a committee of logicians, who suspended their own researches for 3 days. In my statement of the problem they saw something comparable to the set of normal sets. Then they decided that the act of compiling an inventory, as it is an act, is not an object and therefore cannot be inventoried, but they further decided that its output is the catalog of the inventory and, as this is an object, it can be inventoried. We asked the private firm to bill us not for the act but for its result, a result that we then inventoried. For several days I distracted serious scholars from their specific tasks, but I avoided going to jail. Some months ago the janitors came and told me we were without toilet paper. I told them to buy some. The secretary told me I currently had funds only for inventoriable materials, and pointed out that while toilet paper can be inventoried, the natural tendency of such paper is to vanish, for reasons I prefer not to go into, and once it has vanished, it vanishes also from the inventory. I formed a committee of biologists to ask how we could inventory used toilet paper, and the answer was that such a thing is possible, but at a very high human cost. I summoned a committee of jurists, who supplied me with the solution. I receive the toilet paper, I inventory it, and I require its distribution among the restrooms for scientific purposes. If the paper disappears, I report the theft of catalog material by unknown criminals. Unfortunately, I have to repeat this process every 2 days, and an inspector from the Secret Services has uttered some heavy insinuations, criticizing an institution that can be infiltrated by unidentified crooks so easily and so frequently. I am under suspicion, but I have an ironclad alibi. They'll never get me. The flaw is that to find the solution I had again to remove illustrious men of learning, for days and days, from research that would be of use to our country, while we wasted taxpayers' money on hours of work from teachers and staff, not to mention telephone calls and fax paper. But no one is ever indicted for squandering government money if everything is done within the law. 1986. How to spend time. When I call the dentist to make an appointment and he tells me that he does not have an hour free at any time in the coming week, I believe him. He is a serious professional. But when someone invites me to a conference, or to a roundtable discussion, or asks me to edit a festschrift, or write an essay, or join a panel of experts, and I say I haven't time, no one believes me. Come now, Professor, he says, a person like yourself can always make time. Obviously, we humanists are not considered serious professionals, we are idlers. I've done some figuring, and I would urge my colleagues with similar occupations to make their own calculations and tell me if I am right. In a normal year, not a leap year, there are 8,760 hours. Reckon 8 hours sleep per night, 1 hour a day to get up, shave, and dress, add a half hour for undressing and setting the glass of water on the commode, and no more than 2 hours for meals, and we reach a total of 4,197.5 hours. 2 hours for getting around the city adds another 730 hours annually. Holding 3 classes a week, each lasting 2 hours, and setting aside 1 afternoon for advising students, 100 hours. I spend at the university. In the 20 weeks into which I condense my teaching, 220 hours, to which I add 24 hours of exams, 12 hours of examining theses, and 78 hours for faculty meetings and committees. On an average of 5 theses a year, each averaging 350 pages, each page to be read at least twice, before and after revisions, calculating 3 minutes per page, I come to 175 hours. For shorter papers, since my assistants deal with many of them, I assume only 4 for each of our 6 sessions, averaging 30 pages each. Counting 5 minutes per page what with reading and preliminary discussion, add another 60 hours. Not including my own research, we reach 569 hours in all. I edit a semiotics review, VS, which publishes 3 numbers yearly, a total of 300 pages. Not counting time spent reading and rejecting manuscripts, 10 minutes per page, evaluation, revision, proofs, comes to 50 hours. I direct 2 series of scholarly volumes pertinent to my field. 6 books a year totaling 1,800 pages. At 10 minutes per page, we have another 300 hours. Translations of my own texts, essays, books, articles, papers read at conferences. Considering only the languages I can check, I cover an annual average of 1,500 pages at 20 minutes per page. Reading, checking against the original, and conferring with the translator, in person, by telephone, or by letter, and that makes 500 hours. Then there are my original writings. Even assuming I do not write a book, essays, papers, reports, notes for lectures, etc., easily amount to 300 pages. If we include time spent thinking, making notes, writing, and revising, at least 1 hour is spent on each page, another 300 hours. My weekly magazine column, at an optimistic estimate, what with choosing a subject, making notes, consulting a few books, then drafting it, cutting it to the required length, dictating it, and sending it off, takes 3 hours each week. Multiplying by 52 weeks gives 156 hours. I am not calculating time spent on other, exceptional articles. Finally, my mail, to which, still leaving much unanswered, I dedicate 3 mornings a week from 9 to 1, occupies 624 hours. I calculate that last year, accepting only 10% of the proposals received, and limiting myself to conferences closely associated with my discipline, at which I presented my own or my colleagues' research, and various unavoidable appearances, academic ceremonies, meetings required by the relevant ministries. I have totaled 372 hours of active presence. I do not count wasted time. Since many of these engagements were abroad, I calculate 323 hours of travel. This calculation considers that a Milan-Rome trip involves 4 hours, including taxi to the airport, waiting time, flight, taxi into Rome, settling in at the hotel, and arriving at the meeting place. A trip to New York consumes 12 hours. It all adds up to 8,121.5 hours. Subtracting them from the 8,760 hours in a year, I am left with 638.5 hours, in other words about 1 hour 40 minutes per day, which I can devote to sex, conversation with friends and family, funerals, medical care, shopping, sport, theater. As you see, I have not calculated the time spent reading printed matter, books, articles, comics, not part of my work. Assuming I spent my travel time reading, in 323 hours, at 5 minutes per page, simple reading and annotations, I have had the possibility of reading 3,876 pages, corresponding to a mere 12.92 books of 300 pages each. And what about smoking? 60 cigarettes a day, if each one requires half a minute, finding the pack, lighting up, putting it out, comes to more than 182 hours. Too many. I have to give up smoking. 1988. How to buy gadgets. The aircraft flies majestically over boundless prairies, immense deserts. This American continent can still offer moments of solitary, almost tactile encounter with nature. I am forgetting civilization, but it so happens that in the pocket of the seat back before me, along with instructions for rapid evacuation of the plane, in the unlikely event of an emergency, a pamphlet with information about the in-flight movie, and the program of the Brandenburg Concertos available through the headset. There is a copy of Discoveries, a brochure that lists, with alluring illustrations, a series of objects that can be purchased via mail order. In the days that follow, on other flights, I discover analogous publications. The American Traveler, Gifts with Personality, and their similars. They make irresistible reading. I am won over by them, and I forget nature, so monotonous because, at least here, non facet saltus. And I am hoping my aircraft will behave in the same fashion. Culture, as we know, is all the more interesting if it serves to revise and correct nature. Nature is tough and hostile. Culture, on the contrary, allows people to do things with less effort, saving time. Culture frees the body from the enslavement of toil and opens the way to contemplation. Just think, for example, how tedious it is to handle a nasal spray, one of those little pharmaceutical bottles that you press with 2 fingers to allow a beneficent aerosol to penetrate the nostrils. But relief is at hand. Just insert the bottle into the viralizer machine, $4.95, and it is squeezed for you, so efficiently that the spray reaches the most intimate areas of the respiratory tract. Naturally, you have to hold the machine in your hand, and the photographs suggest a Kalashnikov being fired, but then everything comes at a price. I am struck, but I hope not literally shocked, by Omniblanket, which costs all of $150. At the simplest level, it is an electric blanket, but it can be programmed so that the temperature varies from one part of your body to another. In other words, if during the night your back feels cold but your groin tends to sweat, you adjust the program accordingly. Omniblanket will then keep your back warm and your groin cool. If you are nervous and toss and turn in your sleep, ending up with your head at the foot, then you're just out of luck. You will roast your testicles or whatever you have in that area, depending on your sex. I doubt the inventor can be asked to make improvements, because it seems he was burned to a cinder some time ago. Naturally, in your sleep, you might snore and disturb your partner, if you have one. Well, in that case, try Snore Stopper, a kind of watch you fasten onto your wrist before sleeping. The moment you begin to snore, the snore stopper, alerted by an audio sensor, emits an electronic signal that, from your arm, reaches some of your nerve centers and interrupts something or other. Anyway, you stop snoring. It costs only $45. One drawback. It is not advisable for those with heart trouble, and I wonder if it might not endanger the health even of an Olympic athlete. Furthermore, it weighs 2 pounds. You could use it, no doubt, with your husband or wife after decades of familiar intimacy, but hardly with a near stranger during a night of romance. Making love with a 2-pound weight on your wrist could cause alarming side effects. It is well known that, to reduce their cholesterol levels, the Americans have long since taken up jogging. They run for hours and hours until they drop dead of a heart attack. Pulse Trainer, $59.95, worn on the wrist, is attached by a wire to a little rubber sheath slipped over the index finger. When your cardiovascular system is on the brink of collapse, an alarm goes off, apparently. A real achievement, if you consider that in underdeveloped countries a person stops running only when he is out of breath. A highly primitive criterion, and perhaps for this reason children in Ghana are not brought up to jog. It is curious, however, that despite such neglect, their blood cholesterol levels are almost imperceptible. With Pulse Trainer you may run without a care and, further, if you attach to your chest and your waist the 2 Nike monitor straps, an electronic voice, programmed by a microprocessor and featuring Doppler effect ultrasound, will tell you how many miles you have run and your median speed, $300. For the animal lover I would advise Bet. You slip it around your dog's neck and it emits ultrasounds, PMBC circuit, that kill fleas. And it costs only $25. I don't know whether, applied to your own body, it would eliminate crabs. I'd be afraid of overkill. Batteries not included. The dog has to go out and buy his own. Shower Valet, $34.95. A single unit that can be hung on the wall, provides you with a no-mist shaving mirror, integrated radio TV, and both razor blade and shaving cream dispensers. According to the ad, it can transform your boring morning routine into an experience to remember. Spice Track, $36.95, is an electric machine stocked with little tubes of all the spices you might wish. In poor households the spices are kept in a row on a shelf over the gas stove, and when, for example, the family wants some cinnamon on its daily dish of caviar, they have to sprinkle the spice with their fingers. But, as a member of the privileged class, you will simply tap out an algorithm, in Turbo Pascal, I believe, and the spice of your choice will come spinning to a stop right in front of you. If you want to give that special person a present for his or her birthday, a mere $30 is enough to have him, her send a copy of the New York Times of the date of her birth. If she was born on the day of the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima, or on the day of the Messina earthquake, that's just too bad. This gift can also be useful in humiliating people you dislike, if they happen to have been born on a day when nothing occurred. During flights of some length, for $3 or $4, you can hire headsets that allow you to hear various musical programs and the soundtrack of the in-flight movie. For frequent and compulsive travelers with a pathological fear of AIDS, the sum of $19.95 will buy a personal, or rather personalized, sterilized, headset you can carry with you whenever you fly. As you move from one country to another, you will want to know how many German marks a British pound is worth, or how many Spanish doubloons you need to buy a taller. The underprivileged use a pencil or a $10 pocket calculator. They look up the exchange rate in the newspaper and they multiply. But the rich can purchase a $20 currency converter. It gives the same answer as the calculator, but every morning your CEO has to reprogram it according to the newspaper values, and in all likelihood it is unable to answer the non-monetary question. What's 6 times 6? The exquisite aspect is that this instrument, costing twice as much, does half what the others can do. Then there are the various miracle engagement organizers, Master Daytime, Memory Pal, Loose Leaf Timer, etc. A miracle organizer, superficially, is like an ordinary engagement book, except that as a rule it won't fit into any pocket. As in an ordinary engagement book, for example, after September 30th you find October 1st. What changes is the description. Imagine. The helpful example goes that on January 1st you make an appointment for 10 a.m. on December 20th, almost 12 months in the future. No human mind can memorize such an insignificant detail for so long. So what do? On January 1st, you open the book to the page for December 20th and you write, 10 a.m., Mr. Smith. Wonder of wonders. For most of the rest of the year you can forget that burdensome engagement. And then, at 7 a.m. on December 20th, as you are eating your breakfast cereal, you open the book and, as if by miracle, you remember your appointment. But what if on December 20th, I ask, you wake up at 11 and don't look at your book until noon? Answer. If you have spent $50 for the miracle organizer, you will at least have the common sense to get up every morning at 7. To save time at your toilet on that busy December 20th, there is the tempting electric nose hair remover, or rotary clipper, for $16. This is an instrument that would have fascinated the Marquis de Sade. You stick it into your nose, as a rule, and, as it rotates, it snips off the hairs inside, inaccessible to the nail scissors with which the poor usually, and vainly, attempt to cut them. I haven't been able to find out whether or not there is a macro version for your pet elephant. Cool Sound is a portable refrigerator for picnics, with built-in TV. The fish tie is a necktie in the form of a cod, 100% polyester. The coin changer, a little machine that dispenses small change, spares you the trouble of having to dig into your pocket before buying the newspaper. Unfortunately, it takes up the space of the reliquary containing St. Alban's femur. There is no information as to where you will find the coins to fill it. Tea, provided it is of good quality, requires only a vessel for boiling water, a spoon, and, if you like, a strainer. Tea Magic, $9.95, is a highly complicated apparatus that succeeds in making the preparation of a cup of tea as laborious as that of a cup of Turkish coffee. I suffer from various liver ailments, excess uric acid, atrophic rhinitis, gastritis, housemaid's knee, tennis elbow, avitaminosis, articular and muscular pain, hammertoe, allergic eczemas, and perhaps also leprosy. Fortunately, I am not a hypochondriac into the bargain. But the fact is that I must remember every day, at the right time, which pill to take. I have been given a silver pillbox, but I forget to fill it in the morning. Moving around with all those filled bottles means that you must then spend a fortune in leather goods, and it's also inconvenient when you use your skateboard. Now Tablet's cupboard has found the solution to all that. Occupying no more space than a Volvo, it accompanies you throughout your working day and, rotating, automatically it offers you the right pill at the right moment. More elegant, however, is the electronic pillbox, $19.85, for patients who have no more than 3 diseases at any one time. The box has 3 compartments and a built-in computer that emits a beep at the moment you are to take the pill. Trapeze is magnificent if there are mice in your home. You insert some cheese and set the trap, and then you can even go out to the opera. In a normal trap, the mouse, on entering, touches a spring activating a metal bar that kills him. Trapeze, on the contrary, is designed in the shape of an obtuse angle. If the mouse dawdles in the vestibule, he is spared, but he doesn't get to eat the cheese. If he nibbles, the object turns 94 degrees and a shutter comes down. Since the device, which costs $8, is transparent, you can, if you choose, watch the mouse in the evening when there's nothing good on TV. Or you can liberate it in the fields, the ecological option, or throw the whole thing in the garbage, or, during sieges, empty the trap directly into a pot of boiling water or oil. Leaf Scoop is a glove that transforms your hands into those of a palmiped born, through radioactive mutation, from the crossbreeding of a duck with a pterodactyl via Dr. Quatermass. It is used in the collection of fallen leaves in your 80,000-acre park. Spending a mere $12.50, you save the salary of a gardener and a gamekeeper. We recommend it to Lord Chatterley's attention. Tie Saver covers your neckties with a protective oily film so that, chez Maxim, you can eat tomato sandwiches without then appearing at the board of directors meeting looking like Dr. Barnard after a difficult transplant. Only $15. Ideal for those who still use Brilliantine. You can wipe your forehead with the tie. What happens when your suitcase is crammed to the bursting point? Fools rush out and buy a second suitcase, in suede or pigskin. But this solution means that afterwards you have both hands occupied. Briefcase Expander is, so to speak, a pack saddle that sits astride your regular suitcase, and you can use it for everything that won't fit into the first bag, achieving an overall girth of 6 feet or more. For $45 you enjoy the sensation of boarding the plane with a mule under your arm. Ankle Valet, $19.95, allows you to conceal your credit cards in a secret pocket fastened to your calf. Indispensable for dope smugglers. Drive alert is placed behind the ear when you drive, so that the moment you doze off, or start to seize, as the comics put it, and your head slumps forward beyond an established safety limit, an alarm goes off. The photographs indicate that it transforms the wearer's ears into something reminiscent of Star Trek, Elephant Man, or the young Clark Gable. When you are wearing it, if someone asks you, "Will you marry me?" don't answer with too vigorous an affirmative. The ultrasounds would do you in at once. I would also mention in passing an automatic bird feed distributor, a personalized beer stein with a bicycle bell, ring it to order a second round, a face sauna, a Coca-Cola fountain in the form of a gasoline pump, and bicycle seat. A double bicycle seat, one per buttock. Good for those with a prostate problem. The ad informs us that the device has a split-end design, no pun intended. If between planes you also explore the newsstands, you learn many things. Some days ago I discovered that there are various magazines addressed exclusively to treasure hunters. Trésors de l'Histoire, for example, which is published in Paris, contains articles about fabulous caches possibly buried in various zones of France, giving specific geographical and topographical details and information on treasures already found in those localities. The issue I bought includes directions regarding treasures to be found even on the bed of the Seine, ranging from ancient coins to objects thrown into the river over the centuries. Swords, vases, boats, not to mention other goodies including works of art. There are also treasures buried in Brittany by the apocalyptic sect of Ion de l'Estoile in the Middle Ages. Treasures from the magic forest of Brocéliande, dating back to the days of Merlin and the Grail cycle, with detailed instructions for identifying, if you strike it rich, the Holy Grail itself. Treasures interred in Normandy by the Vendéans during the French Revolution. The treasure of Olivier le Diable, the barber of Louis XI. Treasures mentioned, ostensibly in jest, though they actually exist, in the Arsène Lupin novels. Further, there is a Guide de la France Trésorière which the article only describes generically, because the complete work is available for 26 francs. It contains 74 maps, scale 1 to 100, allowing the reader to choose the region most convenient for him. Meanwhile, the reader will be wondering how you hunt for a treasure underground or underwater. No problem. The magazine offers articles and advertisements describing a vast range of equipment essential for the treasure hunter. There are different types of detector, variously sensitive to gold or metals or other precious materials. For underwater hunting, there are wetsuits, masks, machines with discriminating devices that identify only jewels, and, of course, there are fins. There are even special credit cards with which, after spending $2,000, you can select another $200 worth of goods, free. The existence of such a bonus is puzzling. By this time the customer should have discovered, at the very least, a casket filled with pieces of 8. For $800 you can be the proud owner of an M-scan. Though somewhat bulky, it can identify copper coins at a depth of 22 centimeters, a chest at 2 meters, and a metal mass enclosed in an impenetrable cell as much as 3 meters below your feet. Further instructions explain how to hold and orient the various types of detectors, advising that rainy weather facilitates the hunt for large masses, while dry weather is best for small objects. The Beachcomber 60 is specially engineered for searching beaches and highly mineralized terrain. As you can imagine, if a copper coin is buried next to a vein of diamonds, the machine might act up and ignore the coin altogether. Moreover, another ad reminds us that 90% of the world's gold is still to be discovered, and the easy-to-handle gold spear detector, $1,500, has been specially conceived to identify auriferous veins. A pocket detector, metallicator, is available at a modest price for use in fireplaces and antique furniture. For less than $40, an AF2 spray will clean and remove rust from the coins you find. Also, for the less wealthy enthusiast, there are numerous radioesthetic plumb lines. And for further information, there are numerous volumes with such alluring titles as The Mysterious Story of French Treasures, Guide to Buried Treasure, France, The Promised Land, Caves and Caverns of France, and Treasure Hunting in Belgium and Switzerland. You will wonder why, with all this inestimable wealth at their disposal, the editors of this magazine waste the best days of their lives writing instead of setting off for the forests of Brittany. The fact is that the magazine, the books, the detectors, the fins, the rust cleaners, and all the rest are sold by the same organization, which has a chain of shops virtually covering the continent. So the mystery is quickly elucidated. They have already found their treasure. What remains to be discovered is the identity of those who enrich these editors, but they are probably the same people who, in Italy, try to find spectacular bargains at televised auctions and rush to exploit the incredible beneficence of wholesale furniture outlets. At least the French enjoy some healthy hikes in the woods. 1986. How to follow instructions. Anyone familiar with Italian cafes knows, and has suffered from, those high-tech sugar bowls that are activated by the customer's attempt to remove the spoon from the bowl. At the first, faint tug, the bowl's lid comes down like a guillotine, causing the spoon to fly into the air, scattering sugar throughout the immediate vicinity, while the victim mentally consigns the inventor of this device to a concentration camp. But, on the contrary, that genius is probably enjoying the fruits of his crime on the remote and exclusive beach of some island paradise. The American humorist Shelley Berman once suggested that in the near future the same genius will invent a totally secure automobile, whose doors will open only from the inside. For a number of years I drove a car that was, in many respects, excellent, except for the fact that the driver's ashtray was set inside the left-hand door. As everyone knows, a driver grips the wheel with his left hand, keeping his right hand free to deal with the gearshift and the various knobs and dials. If you also smoke with your right hand, depositing the ashes in a receptacle to the left of your left shoulder becomes quite a complex operation, one requiring you to remove your eyes from the road ahead. And if the car, like the one I am describing, can attain a speed of 80 miles per hour, the few seconds distraction it takes to knock ash into the ashtray can mean sodomizing a Mack truck. The gentleman who invented this system was a serious professional who has caused the death of many people, not through tobacco-related cancers but through collisions with a foreign body. I have a passion for word processing systems. If you buy one of these programs, you are given a package with some diskettes, instructions, and a guarantee, which costs anywhere between 800,000 and a million lire. For instruction, you can have recourse either to a company-provided instructor or to the manual. The instructor has usually been trained by the inventor of the sugar bowl mentioned above, and it is advisable to empty a magnum into his chest the moment he sets foot inside your door. They'll give you perhaps 20 years, less, if you have a smart lawyer, but you will still be saving yourself time. The real trouble starts when you consult the manual. What I now have to say applies to any manual for any kind of computer program or device. A computer manual appears to be a plastic container with sharp corners, which you must not leave within reach of the children. When you slit the contents out of this container, they seem to be a number of booklets bound in reinforced concrete, and therefore impossible to transport from living room to study. Their titles are conceived in such a way as to prevent you from understanding which should be read first. The less sadistic firms usually give you only 2, the more perverse organizations offer as many as 4. Your immediate impression is that the first manual explains things step by step, for the retarded, while the second is addressed to experts, the third to professionals, and so on. Wrong. Each booklet says things that the others do not say. The things you need to know at once are in the manual for engineers. The information for engineers is in the manual for the retarded. Moreover, on the assumption that in future years you will amplify the manual, they are bound in loose leaf style, with 300 sheets or more. Anyone who has handled a loose leaf notebook knows that, after it has been consulted once or twice, apart from the difficulty in turning the pages, the rings bend out of shape, and soon the binder explodes, shedding leaves all over the room. Human beings accustomed to seek information are used to dealing with objects called books, perhaps featuring pages with color-coded edges or indentations, as in address books, so that readers can promptly find what they need. The authors of computer manuals are unaware of these humane conveniences and supply objects that last about 8 hours. The only reasonable solution is to dismember the manuals, study them for 6 months under the guidance of an etruscologist, condense them into 4 file cards, which will be enough, and throw the originals away. 1985. How to become a Knight of Malta. I have received a letter on paper headed Ordre Souverain Militaire de Saint-Jean de Jérusalem, Chevaliers de Malta, Prieuré Oecuménique de la Sainte Trinité de Villedieu, Courtier General de la Valette, Prieuré de Quebec. The letter contains an invitation to become a Knight of Malta. I would have preferred a brief directly from Charlemagne, but I immediately reported the matter to my children, to let them know their father wasn't just any old dad. Then I looked over my shelves for the volume of Cafongen and Gallimard Flavigny, Ordres et Contre-Ordres de Chevalerie, Paris, 1982, in which a list of pseudo-orders of Malta is published, circulated by the authentic sovereign military and hospitaller order of St. John of Jerusalem, Rhodes, and Malta, whose headquarters is in Rome. There are another 16 orders of Malta, all having practically the same name, except for very slight variations, and all repudiate or recognize one another in turn. In 1908 some Russians founded an order in the United States, which in recent years has been headed by His Royal Highness Prince Roberto Paterno II, Ayerbe Aragona, Duke of Perpignan, head of the royal houses of Aragon and the Balearic Islands, Grand Master of the Orders of the Collar of Sant'Agata dei Paterno and of the Royal Crown of the Balearics. But a splinter order broke off from this one in 1934, when a Dane founded a rival order, giving its chancellorship to Prince Peter of Greece and Denmark. In the 1960s a defector from the Russian branch, Paul de Granier de Cassagnac, founded an order in France, choosing as its protector King Peter II of Yugoslavia. In 1965 the ex-King Peter II of Yugoslavia quarreled with Cassagnac and founded in New York another order whose Grand Prior, in 1970, was Prince Peter of Greece and Denmark, who then left that order for the Danish one. In 1966 the chancellor of this order was a certain Robert Basaraba von Brankovan-Katiemshiakvili, who was, however, expelled, and who consequently founded the Order of the Ecumenical Knights of Malta, whose imperial and royal protector was then to be Prince Enrico III Costantino di Vigo Lascaris Alaramico Paleologo del Monferrato, heir to the throne of Byzantium, Prince of Thessaly, who was later to found yet another order of Malta, the Priorate of the United States, whereas Basaraba, in 1975, tried to establish his own Priorate of the Trinité de Villedieu, the one to which I would have belonged, but his attempt failed. I then found a Byzantine protectorate, an order created by Prince Carol of Romania after he broke off from Cassagnacs, a Grand Priorate of which one Tana Barthet is the Grand Bailiff, while Prince Andrew of Yugoslavia, former Grand Master of the order founded by Peter II, is Grand Master of the Priorate of Russia. But then the prince withdrew and the order changed its name to Grand Royal Priorate of Malta and of Europe, an order created in the 70s by Baron de Choibert and by Vittorio Busa, Orthodox Archbishop Metropolitan of Bialystok, Patriarch of the Western and Eastern Diaspora, President of the Republic of Danzig, Sikh, President of the Democratic Republic of Byelorussia and Grand Khan of Tartary and Mongolia, Victor Timur II, and an international Grand Priorate created in 1971 by the above-mentioned Royal Highness Roberto Paterno with the Baron Marquis of Alaro, of which another Paterno became Grand Protector in 1982. Head of the Imperial House of Leopardi Tomasini Paterno of Constantinople, heir of the Roman Empire of the East, consecrated legitimate successor of the Apostolic Catholic Orthodox Church of the Byzantine Rite, Marquis of Monteperto, Count Palatine of the throne of Poland. In 1971 my order appeared in Malta, born of a schism within that of Basaraba, under the exalted protection of Alessandro Lecastro Grimaldi Lascaris Comenius Vinkmil, Duke of Leicester, Sovereign Prince and Marquess of Dales, and the Grand Master now is the Marquess Charles Stavala de Flavigny, who after the death of Lecastro recruited Pierre Paisleau, who assumes the titles of Lecastro as well as those of His Grace the Archbishop Patriarch of the Catholic Orthodox Church of Belgium, Grand Master of the Sovereign Military Order of the Temple of Jerusalem and Grand Master and Hierophant of the Universal Masonic Order of the Ancient Oriental Rite and the Joint Primitive Rite of Memphis and Misraim. I replaced the volume. Perhaps it, too, contains false information. But I realized that a man has to belong to something if he doesn't want to feel like nothing. Italy's notorious P2 Lodge has been dissolved, while the Opus Dei has lost all secrecy and is now on everyone's lips. I have made my choice, the Italian Recorder Society. 1. True, ancient and accepted. 1986. How to deal with telegrams. In the old days, on receiving the mail in the morning, you opened the sealed envelopes and threw away the unsealed ones. Now the organizations that used to send unsealed envelopes send sealed ones, even by special delivery. You open the letter eagerly, only to find some absolutely trivial invitation. Especially irritating, because the highest tech envelopes now have systems of hermetic sealing that resist letter openers, teeth, jabbing knives. Traditional glue has been replaced by quick-setting cement, the kind dentists use. Luckily we are still safe from promotional schemes, as they always betray themselves with words like, free offer, on the outside, in gold letters. I was taught as a child that when you are offered something free, you should promptly call the police. But the situation is getting worse. In the past you opened telegrams with real interest, ripping the envelopes in your haste. Either they brought some piece of bad news or they informed you of the sudden death of a long-forgotten uncle in America. Now, if someone has a message of no interest to communicate, he sends you a telegram. Telegrams fall into 3 categories. The imperative. You are invited to attend important conference day after tomorrow on cultivation lupins in Apulia Undersecretary Ministry of Forests presiding please tell X immediately time of arrival. Then comes a series of acronyms and numbers occupying 2 pages, in which naturally and happily, the name of the pretentious sender is lost. The taken for granted. As per previous agreement we confirm your participation conference regarding treatment of paraplegic koalas, please fax immediately. Of course, there was no previous agreement, or perhaps the preliminary invitation is still en route, via ordinary mail. But when the letter does arrive, it has been superseded by the telegram, already discarded, and the letter then follows it into the wastebasket. Finally, there is the third, enigmatic category. Roundtable on Computer Science and Crocodiles postponed as announced please confirm availability new dates. What dates? What availability? Wastebasket. Now, however, the telegram has been made obsolete by the invention of overnight express delivery. In this method, which costs sums that would make Tina Brown blanch, the envelope can be opened only with the help of barbed wire cutters, and once opened, it still does not disclose its contents immediately, thanks to the barrier, composed of various strips of scotch tape, that must be overcome. Sometimes this system is employed purely for snobbish reasons, like the ceremonies of ritual consumption studied by Moss. All there is, in the end, is a little note that says, "Hi," but hours are spent in hunting for it, because the original envelope is the size of a garbage bag, and not everyone has the long arms of a Mr. Hyde. More often the envelope has a black mailing function, and also contains a coupon for your reply. The sender is suggesting, to say what I have to say to you I have spent an outrageous sum of money. The speed of delivery expresses my anxiousness, since there is a prepaid reply, if you don't answer you are a scoundrel. Such arrogance deserves punishment. Nowadays I open only the express envelopes that I myself have asked, by telephone, to be sent to me. The others I throw away, but even then they are a nuisance, because they clog up the basket. I dream of carrier pigeons. Often telegrams and express envelopes announce awards. In this world there are honors and prizes that everyone is pleased to receive, the Nobel, the Golden Fleece, the Garter, the Irish Sweepstakes, and others that require nothing but acceptance. Anyone who has to publicize a new brand of shoe polish, a retarding condom, or some sulfurous mineral water, organizes an award. It is not very easy to get a board of judges together. What's difficult is to find winners. That is to say, they could be found easily if the prizes went to young people at the beginning of their career, but in that case press and TV wouldn't cover the event. So the winner, at the very least, must be Mother Teresa. But if Mother Teresa went to collect all the prizes she is awarded, the death rate in Calcutta would soar. The telegram announcing the prize, therefore, must assume an imperative tone and hint at severe sanctions in the event of refusal. Happy to inform you that this evening, within 1 hour, you will be given the golden trust. Stop. Your presence indispensable in order to receive unanimous vote of unbiased jury, otherwise must regretfully honor someone else. The telegram presupposes that the recipient will leap to his feet, screaming, "No, no. It's mine, mine. Oh yes, I almost forgot." There are also those postcards that arrive from Kuala Lumpur signed, George. George who? 1988. How not to use the fax machine. The fax machine is truly a great invention. For anyone still unfamiliar with it, the fax works like this. You insert a letter, you dial the number of the addressee, and in the space of a few minutes the letter has reached its destination. And the machine isn't just for letters. It can send drawings, plans, photographs, pages of complicated figures impossible to dictate over the telephone. If the letter is going to Australia, the cost of the transmission is no more than that of an intercontinental call of the same duration. If the letter is being sent from Milan to Saronno, it costs no more than a directly dialed call. And bear in mind that a call from Milan to Paris in the evening hours costs about 1,000 lire. In a country like ours where the postal system, by definition, doesn't work, the fax machine solves all your problems. Another thing many people don't know is that you can buy a fax for your bedroom or a portable version for travel at a reasonable price. Somewhere between 1,500,000 and 2,000,000 lire. A considerable amount for a toy, but a bargain if your work requires you to correspond with many people in many different cities. Unfortunately, there is one inexorable law of technology, and it is this. When revolutionary inventions become widely accessible, they cease to be accessible. Technology is inherently democratic, because it promises the same services to all, but it works only if the rich are alone in using it. When the poor also adopt technology, it stops working. A train used to take 2 hours to go from A to B. Then the motorcar arrived, which could cover the same distance in 1 hour. For this reason cars were very expensive. But as soon as the masses could afford to buy them, the roads became jammed, and the trains started to move faster. Consider how absurd it is for the authorities constantly to urge people to use public transport, in the age of the automobile. But with public transport, by consenting not to belong to the elite, you get where you're going before members of the elite do. In the case of the automobile, before the point of total collapse was reached, many decades went by. The fax machine, more democratic, in fact, it costs much less than a car, achieved collapse in less than a year. At this point it is faster to send something through the mail. Actually, the fax encourages such postal communications. In the old days, if you lived in Medicine Hat, and you had a son in Brisbane, you wrote him once a week and you telephoned him once a month. Now, with the fax, you can send him, in no time, the snapshot of his newborn niece. The temptation is irresistible. Furthermore, the world is inhabited by people, in an ever-increasing number, who want to tell you something that is of no interest to you. How to choose a smarter investment, how to purchase a given object, how to make them happy by sending them a check, how to fulfill yourself completely by taking part in a conference that will improve your professional status. All of these people, the moment they discover you have a fax, and unfortunately there are now fax directories, will trample one another underfoot in their haste to send you, at modest expense, unrequested messages. As a result, you will approach your fax machine every morning and find it swamped with messages that have accumulated during the night. Naturally, you throw them away without having read them. But suppose someone close to you wants to inform you that you have inherited $10 million from an uncle in America, but on condition that you visit a notary before 8 o'clock. If the well-meaning friend finds the line busy, you don't receive the information in time. If someone has to get in touch with you, then, he has to do so by mail. The fax is becoming the medium of trivial messages, just as the automobile has become the means of slow travel, for those who have time to waste and want to spend long hours in gridlock traffic, listening to Mozart or Dire Straits. Finally, the fax introduces a new element into the dynamics of nuisance. Until today, the bore, if he wanted to irritate you, paid, for the phone call, the postage stamp, the taxi to bring him to your doorbell. But now you contribute to the expense, because you're the one who buys the fax paper. How can you react? I have already had letterhead printed with the warning, unsolicited faxes are automatically destroyed, but I don't think that's enough. If you want my advice, I'd suggest keeping your fax disconnected. If someone has to send you something, he has to call you first and ask you to connect the machine. Of course, this can overload the telephone line. It would be best for the person who has to send a fax to write you first. Then you can answer. Send your message via fax Monday at 5:27 p.m., Greenwich Mean Time, when I will connect the machine for precisely 4 minutes and 36 seconds. 1989. How not to use the cellular phone. It is easy to take cheap shots at the owners of cellular phones. But before doing so, you should determine to which of the 5 following categories they belong. First come the handicapped. Even if their handicap is not visible, they are obliged to keep in constant contact with their doctor or the 24-hour medical service. All praise, then, to the technology that has placed this beneficent instrument at their service. Second come those who, for serious professional reasons, are required to be on call in case of emergency, fire chiefs, general practitioners, organ transplant specialists always awaiting a fresh corpse, or President Bush, because if he is ever unavailable, the world falls into the hands of quail. For them the portable phone is a harsh fact of life, endured, but hardly enjoyed. Third, adulterers. Finally, for the first time in their lives, they are able to receive messages from their secret lover without the risk that family members, secretaries, or malicious colleagues will intercept the call. It suffices that the number be known only to him and her, or to him and him, or to her and her. I can't think of any other possible combinations. All three categories listed above are entitled to our respect. Indeed, for the first two we are willing to be disturbed even while dining in a restaurant or during a funeral, and adulterers are very discreet, as a rule. Two other categories remain. These, in contrast, spell trouble for us and for themselves as well. The first comprises those persons who are unable to go anywhere unless they have the possibility of chattering about frivolous matters with the friends and relations they have just left. It is hard to make them understand why they shouldn't do it. And finally, if they cannot resist the compulsion to interact, if they cannot enjoy their moments of solitude and become interested in what they themselves are doing at that moment, if they cannot avoid displaying their vacuity and, indeed, make it their trademark, their emblem, well, the problem must be left to the psychologist. They irk us, but we must understand their terrible inner emptiness, be grateful we are not as they are, and forgive them, without, however, gloating over our own superior natures, and thus yielding to the sins of spiritual pride and lack of charity. Recognize them as your suffering neighbor and turn the other ear. In the last category, which includes, on the bottom rung of the social ladder, the purchasers of fake portable phones, are those people who wish to show in public that they are greatly in demand, especially for complex business discussions. Their conversations, which we are obliged to overhear in airports, restaurants, or trains, always involve monetary transactions, missing shipments of metal sections, an unpaid bill for a crate of neckties, and other things that, the speaker believes, are very Rockefellerian. Now, helping to perpetuate the system of class distinctions is an atrocious mechanism ensuring that, thanks to some atavistic proletarian defect, the nouveau riche, even when he earns enormous sums, won't know how to use a fish knife or will hang a plush monkey in the rear window of his Ferrari or put a San Gennaro on the dashboard of his private jet, or, when speaking his native Italian, use English words like management. Therefore he will not be invited by the Duchess de Guermantes, and he will rack his brain trying to figure out why not. After all, he has a yacht so long it could almost serve as a bridge across the English Channel. What these people don't realize is that Rockefeller doesn't need a portable telephone. He has a spacious room full of secretaries so efficient that at the very worst, if his grandfather is dying, the chauffeur comes and whispers something in his ear. The man with power is the man who is not required to answer every call. On the contrary, he is always, as the saying goes, in a meeting. Even at the lowest managerial level, the two symbols of success are a key to the executive washroom and a secretary who asks, "Would you care to leave a message?" So anyone who flaunts a portable phone as a symbol of power is, on the contrary, announcing to all and sundry his desperate, subaltern position, in which he is obliged to snap to attention, even when making love. If the CEO happens to telephone, he has to pursue creditors day and night to keep his head above water. And he is persecuted by the bank, even at his daughter's first Holy Communion, because of an overdraft. The fact that he uses, ostentatiously, his cellular phone is proof that he doesn't know these things, and it is the confirmation of his social banishment, beyond appeal. 1991. 3 owls on a chest of drawers. The literature on the Italian sestina by the anonymous Autore della Civetta, one now fills a not inconsiderable shelf, so anyone essaying a Rezeptionsgeschichte of this brief but significant poem cannot fail, in taking on the mantle of its doxologist, to come up against a certain amount of touchy expertise. Still, with all due respect to our illustrious predecessors and contemporaries, it may not be without some interest to repeat here the text that has inspired so many different interpretive readings, the nude simulacrum of the juicences that are alluded there, writing in graphis, significant passage, imago, and perhaps phantom point 2. Let us first consider the text Toure of the definitive version that Segre, 3 with fastidious precision, established as long ago as 1970. Amharaba Sici Coco, Tre Civet sul Como, Che Facevano l'amore, con la figlia del dottore, ma la mamma la chiamo. Ambaraba Sici Coco. Literal translation. Ambaraba Sici Coco. 3 snow owls on the chest of drawers. That were making love, with the daughter of the doctor. But the mama called them Ambaraba Sici Coco. A certain number of versions of this sestina exist in other languages, is Savoir the French version produced by the Ovoir de Littérature Potentielle. It reads as follows. Ambaraba Sici Cocotois chouettes qui font dodo. En basant sur la commode. Une fille trace à la mode. Mais maman cria aussitôt. Ambaraba Sici Coco. Note the loss of the informative, figlia del dottore, literally, daughter of the doctor, restored at the connotative level, however, through the reference to a girl of independent behavior. Point 4. Then there is an anonymous German version, not without some influence of Hugo Ball and perhaps, to a keen and sensitive ear, an authoritative hint of Christian Morgenstern. Ambaraba ZZ Coco. Drei Cows auf dem Vertigo. Die Legten sich aufs Ohr. Mit der Tochter vom Doktor. Doch da schrie die Mutter so. Ambaraba ZZ Coco. More interesting in its poetic achievement, though surely extra moenia as far as the laws of gender and the complex of extratextual references are concerned, is the translation that the distinguished novelist and scholar Erica Jong attributes to a mysterious Count Palmiro Vicarian. 5 There were 3 old owls of stores screwing a girl on a big chest of drawers. But the maid was the daughter of a doctor, and their mother cried, "Come back, lousy owls of stores." Returning to the original, Italian text, we encounter immediately the problem that has so vexed critics, the matter of date. Although the alliteration in the first and last verses prompted Vossler, some time ago, to posit echoes of Proto-Latin literature, in particular the Carmen Fratrum Arvelium. 6 It is beyond doubt that the Sestina cannot date from before the foundation of the University of Bologna, since the girl could then not be described as daughter of a doctor. 7. It is true, however, as Stanley Fish revealed in his magisterial study 8 of the variants of the poem, that in an early manuscript the third verse does not read, "Che facevano l'amore," who were making love, but rather, "Che facevano l'errore," who were doing wrong, implying that, rather than making love, they were committing a sin. Thus the sense of love as crimen is in no way diminished. If anything, it is reinforced by the subtly moralistic allusion. And thus, as anyone can see, in replacing errore by amore only in the successive version, the anonymous author achieved a remarkable paronomasia with the chiamo of the 5th verse, creating a metaplastic antithesis, rich in metasemantic results at the level of actantial structures as well, between the anxious, protective love of the mother and the possessive and heedless love of the owls. Of the owls, or, possibly, of the girl. For, as Hobbes and Hobbes 9 have observed, it is not clear whom the mother is calling. It should be obvious that the mother is concerned for her daughter, but in that case, as Alan 10 so perceptively notes, why should she call the owls and not her daughter, unless all family ties, as well as the sexual characteristics of the dramatis personae, are a good deal less obvious than they would appear at a hasty first reading? 11. In any case, and to return to the problem of date, the poem does not seem to be earlier than the 11th century AD, and perhaps it is somewhat later if, as Le Goff suggests, the chest of drawers appears in the practice and philosophy of interior furnishing with the decline of the feudal economy and with the rise of a peasant class of small landowners, not yet completely free, but in any case liberated from the living conditions of actual serfs. It is toward the 17th century, finally, that in the Ardennes there arose the custom of making love on the chest of drawers rather than on straw, not least because the chest of drawers was usually surmounted by a mirror. 12 The virtually primal scene of the owl's lovemaking, as Marie Bonaparte 13 has pointed out, can of course take place only in a peasant ambience. This observation is an elementary one, as it would be difficult to explain such a concentration of owls in an urban context. Having thus arrived at an approximate dating of the Sestina, we can examine its strophic and metric structures. As is obvious at first sight, the poem's opening verse, repeated at the end, consists of 2 4-syllable units, accented on the first and fourth syllables and on the second and fourth, respectively. This introduces 4 chiastically arranged lines of catalectic and acatalectic trochaic dimeter. The 6 verses obey an ABCCBA rhyme scheme. A difficult and splendid achievement, as Scholes 14 observes, when you consider that in an earlier version, of uncertain provenance, the second verse read, "Tre civet sulla casatiera," 3 owls on the cupboard, with obvious loss of metric and accentual vigor. In any case, an impressive structural analysis of the Sestina can be found in Les Chouettes, the masterly study by Jakobson and Levi-Strauss. The authors take special pains to underline how the first 3 verses present subhuman entities, the owls and the chest of drawers, while the next 3 present human beings, and similarly how the second and fourth verses feature subjects while the third and fifth feature actions. This prodigious semantic symmetry is reinforced, with splendid parallelism, by an extraordinary play of phonological oppositions. In the first half of the first, and last, verse the alliteration proceeds via an oral bilabial, lax, grave, voiced, stop, diffuse, whereas in the second half there is an opposition between 2 pairs of voiceless orsals, in which the first alliterative pair consists of palatalized, strident, compact, diffuse, acute affricates and the second of velar, grave, compact, guttural, tense stops. This double pseudo-alliteration is paronomastically recalled in the second verse, Chevet versus Como, whereas the appearance of the mother represents an elaborate play on the quintuple recurrence of the grave labial nasal, m. At the lexical level, the owls named in the title of the poem are called by name only once in the text. Further, the labiodental grave constrictive voice fricative, v, of Chevet, never recurs in the course of the Sestina except in the guise of the labiodental unvoiced grave constrictive fricative. Thus the presence of the owls, alluded to but never again openly declared, represents in the Sestina a hapax that shines like a solitaire. Summoned up also by the anaphoric che, 3rd verse, la, 5th verse, the owls still dominate the poem. The birds of Minerva, they are unquestionably a travesty of the savants austeres, and, at the same time, as participants in lovemaking, of Baudelaire's amoureux fervents. Hence the identification of the beloved maiden with a cat, orgueil de la maison, since she is exposed on the chest of drawers in Comme vous êtes enter. Amy de la Science, the doctor, et de la volupté, love. The analysis of Jakobson and Levi-Strauss does not involve, nor could it have, during that unfortunate period of Paul Leo structuralist severity, the dialectic of desire, which made its triumphant appearance in the critical history of this poem through the justly famous Seminar 35 of Jacques Lacan. 15. As every scholar knows, at the beginning of that seminar Dr. Lacan, just whose daughter was the girl on the chest of drawers, anyway, collected the elephants previously distributed at the end of Seminar I and distributed among the participants some little owls, asserting that they were more suited to the chest of drawers than the elephants were. 16. Then he noted how, as a rule, a mirror appears above a chest of drawers. But, and here, certainly, we have the stroke of genius in this seminar. While the disciples were concentrating their attention on this most abused paraphernal, Dr. Lacan, with one of his typical coups de théâtre, recognized in the como a typical item of furniture supplied with drawers and then. The analysis of Jakobson and Levi-Strauss does not involve, nor could it have, during that unfortunate period of paleo-structuralist severity, the dialectic of desire, which made its triumphant appearance in the critical history of this poem through the justly famous Seminar 35 of Jacques Lacan. 15. As every scholar knows, at the beginning of that seminar Dr. Lacan, just whose daughter was the girl on the chest of drawers, anyway, collected the elephants previously distributed at the end of Seminar I and distributed among the participants some little owls, asserting that they were more suited to the chest of drawers than the elephants were. 16. Then he noted how, as a rule, a mirror appears above a chest of drawers. But, and here, certainly, we have the stroke of genius in this seminar. While the disciples were concentrating their attention on this most abused paraphernal, Dr. Lacan, with one of his typical coups de théâtre, recognized in the como a typical item of furniture supplied with drawers and then broached his brand new theory of the stade du tiroir. 17. The drawer is in fact the place of repression, and the poem appeared to Lacan as the very allegory of overdranging, whereas the pulsatile action of the owls, only apparently inspired by desire, was revealed as a disguise, not all that implicit, of the Bemikti Gungstreik, or rather, as Lacan himself clarified in his limpid French, as an Überwältigung of the girl object. Mause's Seminar 35 of Jacques Lacan. 15. As every scholar knows, at the beginning of that seminar Dr. Lacan, just whose daughter was the girl on the chest of drawers, anyway, collected the elephants previously distributed at the end of Seminar I and distributed among the participants some little owls, asserting that they were more suited to the chest of drawers than the elephants were. 16. Then he noted how, as a rule, a mirror appears above a chest of drawers. But, and here, certainly, we have the stroke of genius in this seminar. While the disciples were concentrating their attention on this most abused paraphernal, Dr. Lacan, with one of his typical coups de théâtre, recognized in the como a typical item of furniture supplied with drawers and then broached his brand new theory of the stade du tiroir. 17. The drawer is in fact the place of repression, and the poem appeared to Lacan as the very allegory of overdranging, whereas the pulsatile action of the owls, only apparently inspired by desire, was revealed as a disguise, not all that implicit, of the Bemikti Gungstreik, or rather, as Lacan himself clarified in his limpid French, as an Überwältigung of the girl object. But it now becomes absolutely necessary to move on to a more viable, and more verifiable, Anglo-Saxon corrective for all this transalpine mist. We must bear in mind that as early as the 1960s, Noam Chomsky, 18 in what he had first defined as standard theory of the chest of drawers, STCD, had attempted to analyze the WP Ambaraba Sichikoko, where WP stands for, what? Phrase, from, what? The exclamation of Dwight Bollinger when he was exposed, as native informant, to the utterance of the verse itself. The STCD diagrammed the verse in this fashion, but in the successive phase, extended theory of the owls, ETO, he decided to employ the usual asterisk, labeling the verse as in 1. Ambaraba Sichikoko. Truly an ad hoc solution, confuted perceptively by Snoopy, and Snoopy, 1978, with a reference to Frege, for whom, given that the meaning, in the sense of beduting, of every utterance is always a truth value, and given that all phrases marked by an asterisk are neither true nor false, the meaning of 1 must be considered the equivalent of the meaning of 2. 2. Asterisk colorless green ideas sleep furiously. But this has the paradoxical result that anyone wishing to make an assertion concerning the virtus dormitiva of colorless green ideas should utter 1, which would in itself be nothing, as Snoopy, and Snoopy observed, were it not for the fact that the owl poem should then be rewritten in these terms. 3. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. 3 old owls on a chest of drawers were screwing. The daughter of the doctor. But the mother called them. Colorless green ideas sleep furiously. While this paradoxical conclusion inspired Harold Bloom to write a probing essay 20 on poetry as misunderstanding, thus furnishing Jacques Derrida the occasion for some provocatory reflections 21 on interpretive drift, the attempt was firmly knocked down by Quine.22. The last named observed that, if the utterance, 3, had to be read in terms of post hoc ergo propter hoc, if the green ideas, etc., then 3 owls, etc., and if we let P equals colorless green ideas sleep furiously, Q equals 3 owls on the chest of drawers make love with the doctor's daughter, then P could be negated only through modus tollendo tollens, namely admitting that Q is not true. But since Q cannot be negated, given the principle of the identity of indiscernibles, it is impossible to negate P, and thus it must be conceded that colorless green ideas may sleep furiously, which is intuitively false, salva veritate. It is worth remembering the attempt of chafe, and chafe, 1978, whereby coco would be a verb form, third person singular of the preterite of cocaire, and ambaraba sici, a proper noun. In this case the sestina should be read as the story of one ambaraba sici who coked 3 owls on the chest of drawers. The authors did not face the problem of the meaning of cocaire, as they sustained the legitimacy of a purely distributional analysis. But this hypothesis was famously disproved by Kripke in the light of a causal theory of meaning. It is impossible to identify the expression ambaraba sici as rigid designator, for want of evidence of an initial baptism. 23 in response to Searle's objection, 24 namely that ambaraba sici could be replaced by a definite description, like, 4. The only man who cochoed the owls in Como. Kripke pointed out the problems that would derive from replacing a proper name with a definite description in opaque contexts, as in 5. John thinks that Nancy hoped that Mary believed that Noam suspected that ambaraba was not a proper name. For to assert 6. John thinks that the only man who cochoed the owls in Como was not a proper name is not only without meaning, but patently false, since as everyone knows. 7. John is eager to please. And hence John would never venture to invite general reproach by making such silly assertions. A vigorous change of direction was imposed on the whole debate by the generative semanticists, see in particular Philcully, McJackendorf, Klima Toshiba and Gulp, 1979. Working with the English version of the poem, they decided to abandon the inconclusive analysis of the first verse to concentrate their attention on the verses that follow, simplified as in 8, for which they devised the accompanying diagram. 8. 3 owls are screwing the girl on the chest of drawers. The stern polemic among transformationalists, generativists, and philosophers of language was finally settled thanks to the intervention of Montague 1977-25. In an exemplary essay on the poem of the owls, he posited a predicate P. P equals being 3 owls on the chest of drawers who make love with the daughter of the doctor until the mother calls them. Whereby the whole poem can be formalized, indexing a possible world WL. PXW1. Note that, if we assume that in another possible world, W2, the predicate P can be stated as P equals being the sole individual for whom life is a tale told by an idiot. King Lear can properly be represented as PXW2, which demonstrates almost iconically the profound affinity among all works of art worthy of the name. But, reacting against the hypersimplification of the Anglo-Saxon schools, Grimas and the